This is Event Masters. Behind the scenes stories, experiences, and lessons shared by the world's leading event experts. Hosted by Christian Napier.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Event Masters, a behind the scenes look at the organization of the world's most iconic events. And today we have one of the world's most iconic guests with us, Ursula Romero. It's an honor. It's a real honor to have you join us today, Ursula. Thank you for joining. And why don't you just tell us where you're joining us from and what you're currently doing?
Hello, Christian. Well, thank you for having me. It's a same here. It's an honor. I am currently in a small town called Muñoz Pedro, which is about 100 kilometers outside of Madrid. And I've come to spend the weekend with my mom. So that's where I'm joining from, in Spain.
Wow. Well, thank you for carving out time from your weekend with mom to have a conversation with me. I mean, I'm really, really grateful. Just so your guests or our guests, the viewers and the listeners in the podcast know a little bit more about you. So you are a producer, a director. You've won awards. You've been in Cannes. You are now also the co-owner and the managing director of ISB Company, which does host broadcasting and rights distribution for major international sport events. And according to your bio, most recently you produced the live TV broadcast for the Invictus Games in Dusseldorf, Germany. And you've also received international awards for your film Alan and the documentary Blindfold. One thing I really want to ask you about is you studied film and you earned a BA in film studies from the University of Utah, which is my hometown. I'm joining from Sandy, Utah, and my wife and I are both University of Utah alums. And you have an MA, a Master of Arts on Filmmaking by the London Film Academy. And then I have to look here at my list because you speak so many different languages. English, Spanish, German, French, Italian, Portuguese. What did I do? English, French, German, French, Italian, Portuguese. That's 6 that you're fluent in. And you can also converse in Russian, Chinese, and Greek. This is amazing. What an incredible background, Ursula. Like I said, man, this is a huge honor for us to have you on here. And what I want to do is ask you how you got started in this whole thing, how you got started in this business, how you decided that you wanted to have a career in film and in broadcast.
Well, it's actually quite simple. I mean, like many other young girls, I wanted to be a veterinarian, but I was not very good in math. So my dad, who kind of dragged us around the world doing television, one day said to me, "Do you want to work at an event?" And he sent me off to Germany to work on the 1993 Athletics World Championships as a runner or a liaison officer. I can't remember. And I worked for German TV, and I just loved it. It was great. It was spending the summer with Carl Lewis, etc. at the time. And on top of that, I can make some extra money. So I said, I want to do this more. And then I think the next one was 1994, the World Cup in Dallas, where I worked for German television again as a driver, where I got lost a few times in Dallas, driving around. And it was just so much fun that I said, well, I want to do this forever. And then my dad, Manolo Romero, opened ISB in Salt Lake, and I started working there. But of course, he told me, as every good father, you need to have a university degree. So I said, what should I do? And the closest thing to TV was film, and I've always loved film. So I started dreaming about Hollywood and LA and maybe going to UCLA, but then I just I thought, I can't do that to my parents and make them spend so much money on big universities. And I thought, University of Utah is right there. So I signed up for the film for bachelor's at University of Utah, and I got in, and I was able to work on the Salt Lake Games and go to university at the same time. So there you go.
Wow. So your father, so for the 5 people who are viewing this who have not heard the name Manolo Romero, really a legend in this industry, who very, very sadly left us last year. But he kind of got you started in this family business. Did he push it, or was it just completely up to you? Hey, here's an opportunity. If you want to do it, great, but do your own thing.
No, he didn't. He didn't push me at all. I think he probably would have preferred me to be, an engineer or a doctor or something else. But it just kind of fell into it, and I just really enjoyed it. I loved being at the event. I loved being around the people. I loved the whole, the athletes being there, and at the same time, it is kind of telling a story. So, whether you do it in film or whether you do it live, it's actually much more exciting to do it live. And as being at an event and being at an Olympics is it's super thrilling and super, just having the whole world come together and meeting all these people from everywhere, and I just loved it. So I did dabble a little bit in film, but at the end I always ended up coming back because it was just so cool to be able to live different places, meet new people from all over the world, and it was just a natural sort of progression. I tried to get away sometimes, when I went to London, after Salt Lake, I actually moved to Athens for the Olympics there. And it was really great. But then I said, okay, I'm going to try and do a master's degree in film. And I did spend a year after I did my master's, trying to find my way in the film world. But I got reeled back in, and we did the Pan American Games in Rio. So it was like living in London or going to Rio, So it was just kind of a no-brainer, which is where I met Michele for the first time. I know you did a podcast with her. And just meeting people like that, you just had such a privilege, and it's just a huge family, You go from one Olympics to the other, and you meet amazing people like Trisha, like Derek, like, Christy, Nikolai. I mean, all these people that you've already interviewed. So it was just an amazing experience, and I think I just had my first Olympics as experience that I remember is 1984 in LA, where I was a spectator, and I remember going to see Mary Lou Retton, in gymnastics, and we had accreditation. My mom and I were able to go everywhere, and it was amazing. Barcelona 1992, I think, was the last Olympics that I actually went as a spectator, and just to be there was just so cool. The dream team, being able to meet all these people, and so I don't know, I just kind of got hooked, I guess. And still to this day, I'm still hooked. I mean, I just came back 2 days ago from China. I was working on a cycling event. So it's just, the event world is fascinating.
It is fascinating, and when you're telling me about your experiences, I get the sense that you are really, really fascinated by the stories of people, whether they're the athletes or others, which has attracted you to this, and also to the film and the documentary side. And I'm curious, from your perspective, maybe you can give us a little bit more detail about some of the key stories or experiences that really helped shape you. You mentioned that you got started actually on the work side of things in 1993 in Germany. Why don't you unpack that experience a little bit for us? Let us know what that was like, just coming in as a runner in your first real professional work experience doing a major event.
Well, I mean, like I said, I think I kind of always I didn't really have to learn much because, through osmosis and through moving around, because my parents and I basically moved around with the Olympics for quite a while. I'm actually, I think technically I am an Olympic baby because I think I was made in 1976 in Montreal. So my mom tells me. So I think I just had it inside, but I just remember the whole feeling of getting there. I was the young one. Um, and it was just so cool because the other runners kind of took me under their wing. And I am by nature a shy person, I think. So it was just really nice to feel like you're part of a family, and everybody is in the same boat. And, being able to be in the stadium and get the feeling of all these. I mean, at the end of the day, as a liaison officer, I was taking care of all the commentators and running up and down the stairs in the stadium that was packed. And back then, you had all the commentators were there, and it was just so cool to be able to have, to have on one side the German commentator, and the next to it, it was the South American commentator, and then the Russians, and they were all there together, and it was just this multitude of different countries. I think that's what mostly attracted me to it, that you were able to have under one roof the entire world, and everybody was there for the same, and nobody looked at you, where you from, what you spoke, what accent you have or you don't. Everybody's there for the same thing, and everybody is admiring these incredible athletes. And to be able to put that into images, I just thought it was fascinating. So also, it was my first time away from home alone, so I could be, and I was part of the adult world, so that was also very cool. I got into trouble a couple of times just because I forgot that I was 16 and I hung out with the 20-something-year-old, so I got into trouble for staying out too late one time. But it was a lot of fun. And I think that's when I just realized, this event world is something special. It takes somebody special as well to do it. I don't think not everybody is up for, sometimes you work 18 hours a day, sometimes but it's so exciting that it doesn't really matter. You just want to be part of it. And I think that's just what attracted me to it. And I think the fact that it was in Germany, my mom is German, so my mother tongue is German, and it was just very cool to be able to work for German TV. And they also kind of took me under their wing because I was the young one. And back then, actually, was quite funny because I was a little bit, as a teenager, you kind of have these crazy ideas in your head, but I was kind of embarrassed to be Manolo Romero's daughter because I didn't want people to know that I'm there, and I thought I don't want people to think that I'm treated differently or better. So I was trying to pretend like I'm not. But yeah, it was just a great experience. And actually, one of the things that kind of pushed me to go further is that they were looking for somebody who spoke good English. And they asked me if I could do some interviews in the mix zone, and that was just amazing. So I got to interview, like I said, I got to interview Carl Lewis, who was I was a huge fan. And it was just amazing, to be there and to be able to interview all these amazing athletes. So yeah.
Wow. I can't imagine what that experience to be like as a 16-year-old kid, being able to interview an athlete like Carl Lewis. I mean, how did you handle that? I would have just been fumbling over my words. I wouldn't have any idea how to handle myself as a
I think that
16-year-old
probably
kid.
was. I think the interview probably didn't end up very good because I don't know. I'm already terrified of cameras, but I think it went pretty well because I had a German journalist with me, so I had to translate. But I was overwhelmed. And then again, in '94, the following year, at the World Cup in Dallas, that was also amazing because they figured out that my driving skills in Dallas weren't that great. So they sent me out to become a stringer. and to look for, because of my language, and at the end of the day, because of my name, I was able to go to the different, in the IBC, I was going around to the different studios, and asking to exchange athletes for interviews to come into the German studio. So that was also quite cool to be able to go and, oh, I'm terrible with names, but Pele, for example, or, all those guys that were sometimes working as commentators for other studios. So I would go and say, hey, can we ask Pele to come over in the German studio and to do an interview? And so I would be like the young one that they would send out to do all those kind of favors.
Which again, I think is absolutely amazing, because you say, well, I'm camera shy, uh, maybe I'm a little bit introverted, but look at you going out and doing all this stuff. One of the questions I have for you is, you've had opportunity to work all over, all over the globe, doing these things, and things work differently in different countries. You mentioned Brazil, you mentioned Germany, here in the States. You were just in China. Things work differently, and you have to work with a lot of stakeholders, as a broadcaster, to make sure that you have the right access to the venue, that you've got the camera positions in the proper places, and so on and so forth. And they have different cultures and different ways of doing things. And so how have you been, or maybe you can tell us some stories about how you've navigated that, in different cultures, in different areas of the world, with a variety of stakeholders, because that can be a challenging thing to figure out how to work effectively in all these different places.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's again, it's fascinating because, I think you need to like to be able to talk to people, and I mean, I love different cultures. I think one of the things that I am extremely grateful of having this, being grown up like this, is that, my parents never, they always, I'm an only child as well, so that I think that it helps as well. But I changed schools so often that you just kind of have to suck it up and go, okay, I'm either going to make friends or I'm going to sit in the corner and be alone. And I opted for the first version. So I've never been shy to talk to people or make friends, or, and at the end of the day, we're all people. And everybody has their own way of doing things, but I think you just have to adapt. So, I think one of them, there's challenges in every country, obviously. For example, I don't know, Brazil, but things are a bit more relaxed there, and you can't go in with a hammer saying, okay, we need to get this done now, but you have to go and have a coffee and talk about life first, and then, really make them realize that you're actually a friend. And then you can start demanding camera platforms. When you're in other countries, you have to have a list and you have to have it ready to go. Otherwise, they don't, if it's not written down, it doesn't serve for anything. When you're in China, you have to sit in like in China, for example. The first time I got there to do the first surveys for 2008 for the Olympics, people barely spoke English, and people barely had seen foreigners anyway. And for a woman to come in and tell them what to do, well, that was also kind of a new thing, especially a foreign woman. So I remember having my Chinese deputy. She was great, and we would go to these meetings outside of Beijing to discuss the cycling road venue, which was by the beautiful Great Wall of China. But I remember being in a scene like something out of James Bond, where we arrived in this big room with a bunch of men sitting around smoking, and we were the only females in the room. And every time I would try and explain to them that I would like them to put a camera position here or there, or remove a pole because it would block a camera position, they would literally not even look at me, but they would only look at my colleague, and she would then have to translate, and then they would tell her, and she would translate, but they would never actually look at me. until I actually, and maybe this is not politically correct, but I actually went for dinner and decided to join in the drinking and got a little bit too drunk. But the next day, they were all smiling at me and shaking my hands, and somehow the barrier was broken. And because I made a few jokes and managed to not fall over, somehow I'd gained their trust and their respect. And after that, things just went very smoothly. So I think you just have to adapt and kind of feel what the vibe is and what people are like and how they work, and then you just have to. I think you can never come into the country thinking that you know it all, but on the contrary, you have to listen and you have to adapt, and most of all, you have to offer your assistance rather than saying I know it better. Um, and I think that's what has been sort of my way of doing things, and so far, I think it's been pretty successful.
Well, I love this lesson that ultimately it comes down to trust and building trust with people. And it is all about people because at the end of the day, even with all of this incredible technology that you have, it all comes down to the relationships. And so I appreciate you sharing that. That being said, it is very, very complex, this undertaking. Technology is constantly evolving. I'm curious from your perspective, did you face any situations where something broke down, it wasn't working? We had last week on Frank Sapovitz, and he talked about working the NFL Super Bowl in New Orleans, and the power went out for 35 minutes, right after the beginning of the second half, and he walked through how they dealt with that situation. Did you have? And that's one of the unique things I think about this business is, you just can't push it back. You can't say, well, folks, can we just postpone the games another 4 months because we're just not quite ready? I mean, you go when you go. You have these deadlines and you have to meet them. And sometimes everything works perfectly and sometimes it does not. And I'm just curious, in your experience, were there any situations where something didn't work as you were planning, and you had to make decisions very rapidly about, okay, well, this is what we're going to do?
Um, well, I can certainly think of quite a few, and like you said, the biggest difference between filmmaking, for example, and live TV is that in film you can cut and you can go again and say action and go as many times as the film is available or as the camera rolls. But in live, you just have to go, and sometimes stuff happens. So I mean, luckily, well, I consider myself lucky that we haven't had too many really bad situations. And generally, for big events like the Olympics and so on, we know we have a backup for a backup of a backup. But for example, um, a few years ago, I remember we had just got our purchased a brand new beautiful little truck, and we were on our way. Me and the technical manager were on our way to London just after the Olympics, actually, and we were doing a boxing event at the Excel, and we were told that everything was fine, that the fiber was working perfectly, the power, everything was amazing. Don't worry, we've got everything under control. And as soon as we got there, they told us that there was no fiber available, even though they had promised us. So we said, okay, no problem. We have our little satellite. We had a DSNG on the truck. No problem. Yeah, that's fine. You can jump onto the satellite. We organized the satellite. Everybody was happy. And the next morning we started setting up and we wanted to test the satellite. But of course, nobody had thought that the Excel is right in the flight path with London City Airport. So we couldn't find a satellite, or we couldn't point at a satellite. I mean, we tried everything. And then 3 hours before the match, the first match started, my technical manager looked at me and he said, "Look, we can't get out. We can't get the signal out." So we started calling. Of course, there was no other satellite truck was available. Nothing, it was all booked out, and we were moving the truck around. It was literally like putting a puzzle. and it just wouldn't work. And all of a sudden, I had the whole entire boxing federation yelling at me, saying, "What the hell is going on?" And I just said, "Look, I can't do anything. I can't stick my finger out and point at the satellite because it just doesn't work." And of course, the event organizers just kind of threw their hands up in the air and said, "Well, there's nothing we can do." And luckily, by sheer coincidence, there was a friend of a friend of a friend who owned a small DS&G company who happened to have a DS&G close by, and they came up screeching wheels around the corner. And I think the first hour of the session was recorded, and then the rest we went out live. But it was probably the worst 5 hours of my life. And I just wanted to find a hole and jump into it. But then you just have to gather all your smiles and all your good positive energy and say, "Guys, I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do. It's live television, and we'll try to fix it as much as possible." And in the end we did. But it happens. So
Oh man, I can't imagine the pressure. Uh, you've got to have some what I would call a roll with the punches mentality, I think, to survive in this game, because if you don't have that, then that will just overwhelm you.
yeah.
How is it that you keep these experiences in perspective and maintain your sanity when everything is just, uh, falling apart around you?
I don't know. I mean, I think I think I'm just probably quite a calm person, or calmer than I think. But in situations like that, I tend to just kind of go, "Well, there's nothing I can do. There's only so much." You just have to be confident that you've done everything possible in your power. And then you need to know, I guess you need to have the right phone number to call. You need to know who to contact. And if you've done all your A, B, C, D, and you've come to the end of the road, then that's it. And there's sometimes you just can't. And then, of course, you have to remind yourself that we're not saving lives. And there's actually a very funny cartoon that it's like it's a cartoon. It's like a meme where you have two surgeons, and they're in surgery, and they're stressing out over a person that they're doing surgery on, and one of the doctors looks at the other and says, "Don't stress out, man. It's not live television." So I guess it's the same thing. You just have to remind yourself that at the end of the day, it's just television, and we're not saving lives. But we do have a tendency to over dramatize sometimes, and I think that's why a lot of people end up giving up or quitting in this industry, because it is quite stressful. And you just have to keep your calm and just say, "Look, I mean, there's always a solution." My dad used to say, "Big problems have big solutions." And then the other thing that I unfortunately, I hate to use the saying that he used, but and again, apologies for the bad word, but he used to say, "Assumptions are the mother of all fuck ups." So you just have to make sure that you cover all your what ifs and buts, and if it doesn't work out, then that's it. So
Well, it sounds like to me like he passed on a lot of really, really valuable and hard won knowledge to you, and you have kind of taken this over. So we're talking about some of the technical aspects of the broadcast elements with live events, but you're actually running this business, and I'm curious about the evolution from going from someone who's kind of on the ground doing production to then leading more of the production efforts to actually then running the company. I mean, that's it requires certainly domain expertise, but also some different or maybe complementary skill sets. So perhaps you can just share a little bit about how that evolution was for you, going from, the 16-year-old runner in Germany to now basically running this business?
I don't know. I think it's like I said before, I think it's just kind of, I think I'm a pretty good listener, and I'm a good learner. So I think I just kind of always listened to him and paid close attention to him. We're a very small family, so I just, we talked a lot, and he, he always explained everything to me, and just by being around him. But obviously I have my own ways. And I think I've been kind of running the company now since 2000, I would say 2016, 2017, and then we had the pandemic in between, which obviously brought everything to a screeching halt. But I don't know. It's really difficult. Also now it's quite difficult than I think what my dad lived, because now the competition is very high. There's so many events. There's so many different ways of broadcasting events. You don't have just broadcasting. You have streaming. You have anything from tier A level productions to, I don't know, D level productions, where it's just streaming through a phone. And I think that has become also quite difficult in trying to navigate and trying to understand what kind of quality people are expecting or wanting and needing. And at the same time, I mean, the good thing is that ISB is a fairly small company. We're 10 people, and we grow depending on the event. So last week and I also, I mean, obviously, in order to grow, being a private company, we have to go out and bid a lot, which is the hardest thing actually for me, because I actually like being at the event and running around. But doing the bidding and going out and selling, I don't like to use that word, but at the end of the day, is finding clients. That to me is the most stressful part. But you have to do it. And so, but the good thing is that we are a very small core team. And we've all known each other for a long time. We know how we work with each other. And then depending on the size of the event, we grow. But sometimes it's basically just the 10 of us, and we roll up our sleeves, and if we have to pull cables, we pull a cable. If we have to run camera, run camera. I like to direct quite a lot as well. So if I need to direct something, I'll direct. Like a couple of weeks ago, we did the local baseball federation event here in Madrid with 5 cameras, and we did it basically again just the 10 of us. In a couple of weeks, we're doing an event with the International Modern Pentathlon Union in Bali, which is only for streaming, and it's a small event. But again, it's all of us doing it, so we're all going to travel together with our equipment, and we're going to just have some fun. And then obviously you have to deal with events like the Invictus Games, where we had 230 people from all over the world in Germany in 7 days. Last year in Birmingham, Alabama, we had the World Games, which were close to 350 people. So it just shrinks and grows depending on the size of the event, and the beauty and also the complication is that again, depending on where you are and which part of the world you are, you have to use different approaches and different methods to lead the group. And I'm a very hands-on, and I'm also, I don't believe in micromanagement. I'm more of a, I want to be able to delegate and give people the benefit of the doubt, which I think helps as well. But I also need to know that I have people that I can trust, and if I need to get angry or mad, then I will do it. But I have a tendency to be, as people say, too good. But I that's just the way I am. I don't want to be a harsh leader or anything like that. I think I'm part of the team, and we're all part of the team. And if I need to stay up until 3 a.m. pulling cable, then I will do that. And and if I need to make coffee because people are getting tired and we need to make coffee or sandwiches, and I'm the first one there. So, and that's my philosophy. I don't know if that's right or wrong, but that's how I think I am. And my dad is also one of those people that, he has a reputation of having been tough. But I know he's also the first one who will be the first one there and the last one there. And same thing, if bricks need to be laid or a platform needs to be built or moved, he will be the first one who would have, rolled up his sleeves and done it. So that's I think that's a very important philosophy for this kind of work anyway. And that's what I'm proud of, that I think that's what I'm good at, and making people feel that we're all part of a team.
Well, I want to ask you about that a little bit more, and you addressed it already, I think, in some of your response here, but you mentioned that it's a small team, but you've been together a long time. So whatever you're doing is working because people want to stay, right? If you weren't doing it that way, then you would have a lot of turnover and you'd always have to be cycling in new people. But your core team, it sounds to me from what you're saying, is it's been together for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's a credit to you, for being able to maintain that. And one of the questions I have for you is how did you navigate the pandemic? Because like you said, everything just shut down. And I know, for me, my own personal experience, my contracts were frozen for an extended period of time. It was pretty dicey, financially there for a little while. And, how were you able to actually maintain it? There were a lot of people that left this industry when it shut down. How are you able to actually maintain your core during such a difficult, tricky, uncertain time period?
Well, obviously we all ended up working from home. I think my dad and I had a long discussion, and we felt that this was going to be overcome. And we kind of took a step back. And the first thing we did was talk to every single one of our employees and said, look, you're welcome to stay. There's obviously the government ended up, giving out help and so on. But we decided that we were going to offer our employees a reduced income. So we reduced everybody's, including everyone. And we asked everyone if they were willing to stay for a reduced salary, or if they wanted to quit and then go on to welfare. But luckily, or I don't know if luckily or not, but everybody decided to stay. We did have to let go of one person, but that was something because they had just recently joined, and it was in their benefit to go back home. Also, what we also did is we also kind of all of us pulled together and just really went through every single bid tender process there was. We came up with ideas, for example, with the Karate Federation, which we have a long-standing relationship with. We came up with some ideas to do some streaming, to do some recaps with some like this Riverside, Zoom, all these different platforms that came up. And we did some sort of live commentary from karate experts from around the world. And we did a few things here and there. But we really just did decide to go for it. And we had enough of savings so that we can sustain our employees. I think they all really appreciated it, obviously, at the end of the day. I did come kind of down hard this year because we had a lot of events. So we went from not doing much to really going crazy this year. So it's been a really tough year in a good sense. But it's been really tough with everything else that's happened, and it's been kind of full on. So we went from doing absolutely nothing to all of a sudden being full on. And I think, somehow what comes around goes around, and I believe in karma. I don't, and I think being good and being kind and being generous at the end of the day does pay off somehow. And like I said, that's my way of life, and I think I'm not going to change that for a while, at least.
Well, I think it's a great way to go. You mentioned that you had to become creative in this pandemic because we're all going to be working remotely, and we have commentators who are joining events remotely. That wasn't really a thing, uh, and I'm curious, how you make that shift. You're figuring this stuff out on the fly, but then looking ahead, as you mentioned, the landscape is rapidly evolving with all of these different streaming options and on social media and so on and so forth. And so I'm curious to hear your take as well about what the future holds, for ISB and also for broadcast more broadly. What does the future look like? Because things seem to be changing very, very rapidly here in the last few years.
Well, I was just actually invited on a panel discussion a few weeks ago at the IBC in Amsterdam, and it was precisely about that. And it was talking about remote production, whether it's good or not, whether it's effective or not, whether it's sustainable or not, whether it's more effective. Um, and we have this chat with our clients quite a lot because obviously, rumors go around about remote production and cheap productions, and you can do so much, and of course you can, but there's always a bunch of buts. You need to have the right scenario, you need to have the right conditions, and I think, even though I shouldn't be saying this probably, but I actually think that television is kind of a thing of the past. And I think that more and more, we are, maybe not my generation, but I don't think very many people are going to be watching sports on television for very much longer. Also, I don't think that you will have many people sitting down and watching a whole football game or an entire athletics world championships unless you are an athlete yourself or you are a huge fan. So I think all the content, the peripheral content that goes with it, is becoming more and more interesting. I think people are more and more interested in the behind the scenes stories, and the side stories. And I also think that it needs to be content that is quickly and easily accessible, meaning over the phone or iPad or one of the many devices. So I think, for example, we work together with the World Games Association, and the next World Games are going to be in China in 2025, which I'm actually off on Sunday to have some meetings already to start planning. And our big, my chat to them is always, we need to think much more social media. We need to think vertical. We need to think putting stories on that'll go viral, especially in a place like China where they love anything that is on TikTok or any stories like that. There's I think the consumption and the way we consume is changing drastically. And of course, it's amazing to have your big screen TV at home. And I think people still will want to have their big screen TV at home to invite people over so they can watch it in HDR, 4K, 8K, what have you. But I think the general population doesn't really care that much about the actual quality, but it's more about the access to the actual sport, and access to their heroes. And I think that also changes the approach of the production. It changes the budgets, and budgets are, in some occasions, are becoming smaller and smaller. For the big sports like football, basketball, American football, soccer, obviously that's not going to change for a while. But for other sports, I think the federations and the organizers really have to rethink on how they are presented. And we certainly are, I think one of the pluses of having a small company like ours is that we can easily sit down with our clients and talk to them and listen to them and try and adapt for them and come up with solutions for them. And we're always trying to investigate and also, test and I mean, I don't know. Every time I go to China, I come back with new ideas because they always have new ideas on how to broadcast stuff and how to stream it in a different way, in a more efficient way, or maybe in a perhaps in a cheaper way. But at the end of the day, it works. So we just have to open our minds and maybe come up with new ideas. But we have to be very careful when we use the word remote production because it's not necessarily as easy or simple or cheap as it sounds. So I think it's a fine balance between what is it that we want to tell, how do we want to tell it, and most of all for whom. And that way, I think that's also one of the reasons why my film background is coming more and more to the surface because content production is becoming more interesting, especially for sports. So now we've also created a branch that is going to be focusing more on content production because obviously there's so many beautiful and fascinating stories out there. And I think people are looking for more and more of these kind of inspiring stories around the event, not just during the event. I don't know if I think I went a little bit crazy
No,
there.
I'm soaking it all in because what you're saying really resonates with me because I am fascinated by people's stories. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing here, having conversations with people like you, because it gives me an opportunity to hear the stories of amazing people, and these stories are very powerful. I'm preaching to the choir here, I know, but when you hear somebody's story, whether it's a famous athlete or it's the person who's running concessions or whatever, it builds empathy and you build human connection. And I think that even though we're all super plugged into our devices, we're all using these things all the time, but a lot of that consumption, a lot of this usage is to try to build connection with people, right? So we are watching stories, we're consuming content, we're sharing content that's meaningful to us with our
Yep.
tribe, and it's all about connection. And so I think you're coming from a great place because ultimately what you're trying to do with your clients is find the ways that they can connect with the people that they serve. And ultimately it just comes down to that. So I think what you're doing is absolutely fascinating. And so I appreciate you coming on and taking an hour of your time to share your experiences.
No worries.
Before we wrap it up, though, I
I
do.
wanted to tell you as an example. I was just thinking because you said if I had examples, but just now, and as I was in China for the cycling tour of Guangxi, which is the last UCI World Tour stage, we always bring. I usually go as a director or assistant director, and I bring motorbike teams and my favorite helicopter camera operator on the planet, in which the commentator we had there actually called Da Vinci, because his shots were just stunning. And Guangxi is an area that I just recommend anyone to go because it's so stunningly beautiful. But one of the stages, he managed to, and it went viral on Chinese social media, but he managed to grab a close up of 4 Chinese people that had climbed on one of these mountain. It's a very mountainous area, and they had climbed, and he managed to zoom in and get these 5 people who had climbed up probably 100 meters just to watch the cycling race. and he zoomed in and then zoomed out and then revealed over this beautiful hill, revealed the cyclist. And the social media said, who thought that in China cycling is not popular? So these people had climbed up all the way this mountain to be able to see it. And the video went viral in China, so, we all assume that nobody watches cycling in China, but obviously they do. And these are the little stories that make it so fascinating, So, yeah.
Oh, wow, that's incredible. Okay, what I'm leaving it open-ended here. Any other stories that you want to share with us, experiences that you've had in any of these wonderful parts of the world that you've been able to serve in? Any other stories that you want to share with us before we wrap it up?
Oh my God, I don't know. There's so many. I mean, I don't know. One of the most amazing moments was when I was able to work on the opening ceremony in Beijing, and I was able to go to the meetings with the creative director of the opening ceremony, who is for me one of my idols, and his name is Zhang Yimou. He's a Chinese film director, and I studied him at the University of Utah. And when I was able to go and hang out in his creative meetings, it was just, for me, it was like, so one of the days that we were there, it was really late night, and I finally got the courage to ask his assistants, which if I could actually go and say hello to him personally. So that was very cool. I think Barcelona 92, I remember being able to go onto the field of play with all the athletes in the opening ceremony, which was also very amazing. I got to hang out with the dream team, with the NBA team. I don't know, just there's so many amazing stories. Also, in Salt Lake for the opening ceremony, during rehearsals, the guy who was the choreographer, his name was Kenny Ortega, and chatting to him one evening, it turns out that he was dancing with Fred Astaire. And then I found out a few years later that he was choreographing Michael Jackson's last tour. Just things like that where you don't even realize it, but then there's so many cool moments that you just, my mom, I remember she was telling me the other day she had lunch one time with Jane Fonda in Switzerland, and then she was on the helicopter on the plane. I think they were flying in '94, going from one venue to the other. They were on a plane together with Plácido Domingo, the opera singer. And then I remember she came back and she was all excited because she had seen Clinton right behind her, and like, so just silly things like that, but that just makes it all, they're moments that you just remember. But yeah, there's a lot of stories. I mean, I could go on forever. Which I'm sure Michele had a lot of stories like that as well. She's another amazing person.
Yeah,
So yeah.
she's fantastic, and yeah, you can sit around at a bar and you can just tell stories for hours, right? This is kind of what we do in this event space. You get together and everybody just starts telling stories, and it just, before you know it, 5 hours have passed and everybody's sitting around telling stories, which is one of the things that I love about this industry. And I'm sorry that this form, this podcast form, doesn't give us that opportunity, unless we did want to record for 5 hours, but probably everybody would be exhausted by then. But this has been absolutely fascinating, and I'm sure you've got many more incredible experiences to come for you and for ISB. If viewers and listeners, if they want to learn more about the services ISB provides or the things that you do, what's the best way for folks to actually reach out and connect with you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn as Ursula Romero, and we also have a website, which is www.isbtv.es. And that's it. You're welcome to reach out. Our webpage is not very fancy, but it has a lot, it's basically what we do, who we are, and our team is always happy to listen, and if we can help in any way, we always love to help out, even if it's just advice or consulting or a happy hello.
All right, fantastic. Well, Ursula, we'll put that contact information in the show notes for the podcast. Thank you so much for sharing an hour of your day with me and with our viewers and listeners. It's really, really appreciated. And viewers, listeners, please like and subscribe to our podcast, and we'll catch you again soon. Ursula, thank you so much.
Thank you, Christian. Have a good day.